they're literally pouring off the stage. So from the back, you probably can't see, but underneath me here, the whole castle of flute players. It's exciting to have them here. It's the Boston Flute Academy, with most of them having driven a little ways to get here, right? So this concert has been in the works for a year and a half? Yes. So I won't make a joke about flute players and about how long it takes things. No. So I'm so happy to have them here. We're happy. I'm Abby Dewitt. I'm the executive director of 19 Carter. For those of you that haven't been here before, we have plenty of information in the back. I could talk about it for hours, but I won't. If you have any questions, please come and ask me or ask any of our volunteers or staff that are here tonight. I'd like to now introduce, without further ado, Judy Grant, the conductor.
Thank you, Evie. Thank you so much for having us. We're so delighted to be here. And we're going to take a tuning note, and then we're going to begin with two iconic classical themes. They're very short, as a little appetizer to our main program. And they're by Mozart and Dvorak. I think you'll recognize them. Was originally written for chorus by our Japanese composer, Hirose, and it was transcribed and arranged in the 1990s for flute ensemble. So there were lyrics and words in the original version, which you'll find in your program notes, but I'll give you the summary of that. In the first movement, there was no ocean. You want to imagine a deserted inlet and how the water has come in and erased all the footprints of the birds as if they were not there. And the tufted puffin, you can picture puffins on a high ledge, and they're smelling the salty air and scampering about. They're baby puffins, and so that's your image for our next piece, and we'll be playing the first two movements of Songs of the Ocean. back for the cadenza. Our next piece, Beckett's Whisper, is by a living composer. Ron Korb is a Canadian flutist, and he did write this for the 2013 Canadian Flute Convention. And Samuel Beckett was a Dublin-born playwright, and so that was the inspiration for this piece, Beckett's Whisper. And the composer is imagining Samuel Beckett when he was living in France in World War II, and he imagined him longing for his homeland. We're going to rearrange slightly for this next piece. This will be by Bernoulli Wen. So this is two groups of flutists here who have come together to play for you today. And this is the Bach Fugue in G minor. And scholars and the biographer of Bach feel that this piece was improvised by J.S. Bach when he was applying for a job as an organist back in the day. So we're happy to have it today, and it's been arranged originally, of course, for organ, but it's been arranged many times for many different ensembles over the years, and we're very delighted to play the Bach Fugue in G minor for you today. Cotillon was composed by Serge Palamil, who is a member of your Berlin community, and it's so special to play a premiere of a new work for you tonight. He has coached us on his piece, which is very special for a musician to have the composer. We often wonder, what was the composer's intent? So it's been very special to have his guidance. And the definition of the title is Sparkling Voices, which we named our concert this evening in honor of Serge and this piece. And there are a few notes I would just share in addition to your program notes. It's a lively piece, and it's definitely, you hear the joy of the voices going back and forth. And the Surgeon General has made it known that loneliness and feelings of isolation are issues facing our society today. So this piece emphasizes connectedness and the joyous interaction of many voices. And our composer is playing in the ensemble tonight, so I hope you enjoy it. And he has made use of all the different voices, in our ensemble. We have the contrabass flute here, the large one, you can't miss it, right? Which plays 2 octaves below the C flute. So we thank Carl for bringing this specialty to us, and it's a very nice contra line. And of course we have our C flutes up here in the front, and of course the bass flute line is very beautiful. We have our 2 bass flutes here and our 2 alto flutes here. So this is the Meliodas chamber players. Ashokan Farewell, and the composer Jay Unger calls his tune a Scottish lament written by a Jewish guy from the Bronx. And you may recognize it as a theme from the PBS documentary series called The Civil War. That was back in 1990. Also by a living composer, Valerie Coleman, and she has ties to the Boston area. She did one of her degrees at Boston University, and she is really one of the composers to watch in the upcoming years. Her works are very, very popular, and she's now on the faculty at Juilliard. And Umoja is Swahili for unity. And so this was originally a choral work that Valerie wrote for the first day of Kwanzaa. But since then, it became the signature piece for her woodwind quintet. It was premiered by the Philadelphia Orchestra in the last year, I think. And so this is the flute ensemble version that she arranged. Michael is one of our favorite composers for flute choir material. She's a living composer and wrote this for the 20th anniversary of the Northern California Flute Camp. So a lot of symbolism with the name Chrysalis. And she says the piece is meant to portray the individual looking in and reaching out at the same time. coming out of a life-changing musical experience as a different, deeper, stronger person ready to fly. So it's in 2 movements, and this is Chrysalis. have one short little piece to add on. It's called Prayer for Peace. And it's by Marissa Dennis.